Well, hello there, it's Ben Hardy here, and in today's video I'm going to be talking about how some dealers can't lower their prices when they need to, but they just simply can't. Before we get in this video though, as always, if you want to save time and money, the next time you purchase a car, link to my car buying guide in the description down below, and then if you want to see more videos just like this, then I recommend you subscribe because I post content every single day. Let's get into it. To properly explain why certain dealers cannot lower their prices, we need to quickly go over some dealership expenses. We're going to start with used car lots, and then we'll dive into new car dealerships with the expenses that they have. So first off, with used car dealers, the biggest expense for most of them is, well, two different things. The first one is going to be rent. Most used car dealerships do not own the dealership that they are selling the cars out of. Usually they are renting the dealership itself sometimes, but also the land as well. And so that's obviously a big payment. Now, some of them end up buying the land, and so this obviously makes it so in the long term they spend a lot less money, but it takes money to be able to do that, and most used car dealers just don't have that much capital. Now, the next big expense is going to be the inventory itself. First off, most used car dealers, they don't pay cash for their inventory. They finance their inventory, so they're constantly paying finance charges on this inventory. And then on top of that, even with the crappy, run-down used car dealerships, they still typically do some level of reconditioning in the cars, so that also costs them money. And so if there are things breaking on their cars, well, that is another expense for them to pay for. And the next thing is going to be cleaning expense with the vehicles, right? If they sell a vehicle, they've got to have someone, typically detail it for the customer so that it at least looks somewhat nice for them as they are taking delivery of it. And then the other part of it is just making sure their inventory looks nice and shiny as they have it posted there on, Main Street, right, to see, for all the customers to see. And then the next big expense that they are going to have is going to be staffing. So with most used car dealers, you usually don't have a ton of staff, and most of the staff is typically paid with commission. They usually have like the owner of the store, and then maybe they'll have like a salesperson, a finance manager. Again, it'll be pretty small operation generally, and since they're being paid off commission, well, they're not making money unless the dealership is making money. And so the dealership isn't writing paychecks unless they're obviously selling inventory. But they'll usually have, at least a couple people on hand that have more salary type positions, maybe like what you'd call like a lot technician, where they're, parking all of the cars for the dealership, cleaning all the cars, all of that. And then maybe they'll have a receptionist as well. But this is generally not a huge expense for, most of these smaller used car dealers because their big expense is in the inventory, and it's also with the rent charge as well. But those are the expenses. You have to understand that every single day that a used car dealer is open, they are spending money. And so unless they are selling cars, they're losing money. Now with new car dealers, they have quite a few more expenses compared to used car dealers, but obviously they have a lot more revenue sources. So the first thing, just like used car dealers, is a lot of new car dealers don't actually own the dealership, right? Usually they are financing the dealership because new car dealerships are extremely expensive. Just to give you an example, the most recent new car dealership purchase that I know of here in Utah was a smaller store with a brand that's not considered the most desirable, and that dealership still sold for something like $50 million roughly. And so you imagine if it's a more desirable brand and a larger dealership, the price just goes up and up. I mean, there are some dealerships that literally would sell in the hundreds of millions of dollars in terms of the purchase price. And well, there are only so many people on the planet that have that amount of money to pay cash for a dealership. And so usually the dealership itself is financed. And so that's a big charge. And sometimes they'll also rent the land that the dealership is built on. They won't actually own the land. So like they'll own the dealership technically, but then they won't own the land. So there's always some sort of cost associated with that. And then just like used car dealers, they'll finance their inventory both on the used side and on the new side as well. So they're paying interest on that. Now with the new cars, obviously there's not really any reconditioning that needs to happen, but they'll have to pay to have those cars cleaned every so often. With the used cars, right, there are reconditioning fees associated with them. And then if stuff breaks on the cars, right, they have to get that fixed. There's always recurring costs with those used cars. Now, the biggest expense for new car dealers, unlike used car dealers, is actually going to be payroll, because with a new car dealership, right, it has to have a certain appearance, so you have way more staff. You always have an accounting department, which has quite a few people that you've got to pay for, and then you usually have receptionists, and then on top of that, you have your whole service department, right? There are a lot of positions in the service department that are paid, obviously based on how much profit they earn for the store, but there are also a lot of positions that are just paid hourly or based on a salary basis. And then you have all of the rest of the staff, the sales staff that you have to pay for as well. Now, obviously, these positions are commission based, but to keep good staff, you got to pay them really well. And so if you look at like a new car dealer's expense sheet, what you're going to see is that, you know, the rent charge might seem like big on the surface. Like I know dealers that will pay, you know, $40,000, $50,000 plus per month just in rent charge. But that pales in comparison to what they have to pay for all the staff. Like the staff, you know, expense could be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars per month after you have to pay for everyone's salary. So it gets pretty crazy. And so the point of me going over all of these expenses, you need to understand that, again, with new car dealers and with used car dealers, there's a lot of money that they have to spend just to keep the lights on. And so unless they're selling cars, they're not making any money, they're losing money, and a lot of it. And so with all of these expenses, this explains why we are seeing such a huge lag in the declines with retail values on both new cars, frankly, and used cars as well. Because with all the expenses that dealers have, a lot of them can't afford to lower the prices on their cars, because if they are already losing money every single day that they're in operation, not even mention things like, you know, lights and air conditioning or heating, all that kind of stuff, like, you know, other charges, because especially with new car dealers, I mean, those buildings are massive, and I don't even want to know the, you know, heating bill on a dealership in the winter time. But anyways, with all those expenses, they've got to make profit on these cars. And so with especially used car dealers being upside down in a lot of their inventory, they're just not willing to take those losses because they, you know, they don't want to go out of business. But what they aren't realizing is if they don't get rid of the inventory now, with the declines that are continuing into the future, then, well, they might not go out of business now, but they will for sure go out of business in the future, because people just aren't going to be willing to pay for the overpriced inventory that they have. But this is a huge reason as to why the retail values lag. And if you don't know, they are lagging by like a factor of 2x. So if you look at last year with wholesale value declines, they declined by over 20%, whereas retail values, they declined by like 8 to 9%. Like that is a huge lag. And you always see some level of lag within the car industry, but like that's pretty massive, right? You'd think that they'd be, you know, more in line with each other. Like maybe wholesale's down by 20% and then retail's down by, you know, maybe not 20%, but maybe at least 14 or 15%. And I'm telling you right now, that's going to continue into the 2023 sales year with the declines that we're seeing. With how we're tracking right now, we're probably going to see another, you know, at least, you know, 10, 15% decline, if not another 20% decline with wholesale values. But those retail values, they're not going to decline at that same level. The retail values are probably, again, going to do the same exact thing, where they're going to decline by 8 or 9%. And so by the end of 2023, we're probably going to see retail values in line with where they should have been at the beginning of 2023. And it's just because of all of the expenses that dealers have. And well, with dealerships being the number one owner of most of the used cars, right, and all of the new cars that are for sale, then it makes sense as to why they have the power to determine what's going to be happening on the market with those vehicles. So to summarize, new car dealers and used car dealers have huge expenses, and because of these huge expenses, they cannot afford to discount their inventory. They can't afford to lose the amount of money they need to lose to get rid of the old age inventory that they have. And so this is in effect propping up the retail car market. And so how you can use this information to help you out as a consumer is understand that you're pretty much just going to have to wait for the market to rebound for retail values to quote unquote bottom out. And what I mean by this is wholesale values are eventually going to hit some sort of bottom before the market normalizes. And since retail values are lagging so far behind wholesale values, then it's going to take them longer to hit that bottom. But what that means for you as a consumer that's kind of crappy is you're not going to be able to buy at the true quote unquote retail bottom, because what will happen is wholesale values will hit a bottom and then they'll start to, you know, normalize and hit some sort of like normal level, which will be higher than the bottom, and then retail values will finally come in line with that. But obviously they won't be coming in line with the bottom of the wholesale value. They'll be coming in line with whatever the normalized market is. And so you'll still have to pay more than the quote unquote bottom, but you'd still be paying less than you will today for these cars on a retail front. But anyways, that's going to sum things up for today's video. Let me know what you guys think about this, and what do you think should be done within the car industry to, you know, basically bring down these costs so then these dealers can just get rid of this inventory. And with that being said, see ya.